Thank you so much for being on the show today, Randi-Lee. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we jump in, I just kind of want to set the stage so parents understand, for some people, this might be a really big disconnect. Why are we talking mental health? And we will put various links in the show notes based on things we talk about and for help, things like that. But one thing that a lot of people don't understand is children, especially with airway disorders, severe learning disabilities, any kind of medical condition, a lot of times there's a mental health component that goes with it. And it's just not addressed. You just don't think about it. You think about their kids. They don't really talk about it. They don't know how to express it. So that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So just kind of wanted to set the stage for everybody so they understand. So let's go ahead and just and jump right in.
All right.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd love it if you would just share with the listeners a little bit about your story and your journey with your son's disabilities and how, what you went through to get help.
Sure. So my son, he's now 16. And he was diagnosed with autism at the age of 8. Prior to that, he was diagnosed with ADHD, ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder, sensory processing disorder. There was a bunch of other ones too. And finally, they're like, okay, yeah, it's autism. They just were like really pushing off giving that diagnosis. They were giving everything but it. And my husband and I, we knew from a much earlier age that he was a little different than the neurotypical kids. And it wasn't until he started having these major meltdowns at school that people were believing us that something was different. And so, but once he got the diagnosis, it was good because we needed that in order for the school to then put proper things into place for him, because prior to that, they weren't doing anything. And then we were able to look for additional help after that. When he was 9, he had his first suicide attempt. And it really opened my eyes to, wow, it's such a young age. And it was around that time that he had this big emotional outburst of just sadness, pure sadness. It was like midnight. And he's going on about, why am I so different? Why don't people like me? Why do they pick on me? And that was kind of my moment of going, well, why do you feel that you couldn't have told me this earlier? Like, why did you feel this wasn't a safe environment to tell me? And I realized that I hadn't been sharing my story with him or with anybody, really. I had been keeping very quiet and pretending that all you need to do in life is just pretend everything's okay.
Right. And just keep going.
Exactly. So it made him feel very upset because he couldn't keep going. So that was kind of the moment that I decided I'm going to start being very loud. And so it was a long process, in and out of the hospital a bunch of times. In grade 7, he went to a treatment facility where he lived there for 3 months. He came home on the weekends, and that made a world of difference because they finally were able to do some different assessments for him. And we realized that he also has a learning disability with his reading and writing. And now he's 16. He's got his beginner's driver's license. He is doing very well at school. He doesn't actually physically go to school. He does all of his work at home because there's so much anxiety with the going to school, and he was bullied for so many years. So that was a whole other big thing. But that is my short version.
Yeah. No, go ahead. No, and what's interesting is, the way that you explained that he just didn't know. And that's one of the things kids don't know, especially because, like you said, as adults, we're just going to push through. We're going to keep going. And they often don't even know the words to say. They just know they're different, right? That they're different than everybody else, and they don't understand why. So as you've gone on this journey with him, especially at such a young age, what was it like trying to find him help and treatment? Did you find this to be, and obviously you're not in the US, correct?
I'm in Canada.
Yeah. Yes, a little bit different, but still, I mean, what was it like trying to find him the right kind of help at this age?
A lot of wait lists, a lot of closed doors. So up until we got the diagnosis of autism, basically there was no help. Without having a diagnosis of something that they considered a reasonable diagnosis to receive help, because
Mhm.
ADHD didn't count, ODD didn't count, sensory processing didn't count. None of those counted um,
Wow.
for getting help. And so it wasn't until we had the diagnosis of autism that the school finally made the proper IEP and the IPRC, which is basically telling them that he needs special support. And then that opened up the door to Bethesda, which is our local organization that deals with kids with autism, or people with autism, really. So that opened up that door so that we could start getting therapy there. They did some ABA with him. And then there is a little bit of government funding where I am, not a heck of a lot. It has changed over the years, but there was different supports that we can now put him in, special camps and things like that, get respite workers. But it was a lot of, okay, where do I go? How do I find this? Because
Mhm.
it's not the easiest thing, especially when you're um, going back and forth to the hospital and telling three doctors the same story over and over and over and trying to get somebody who will listen to you.
Right. Right. And so, what is that like? Because I think that's something a lot of parents can experience. I mean, as a parent, I mean, you must have felt,
It was so frustrating, so disheartening. Because when we would go in, and we actually changed his family doctor, which was amazing that we actually could, because in Canada, it's really hard to get a family doctor. There's not enough of them. Because our healthcare system is tax funded, uh, you pretty much stick with who you got, and you're lucky if you got one.
okay.
So we were really
Hmm.
lucky because my husband had a different family doctor than I did. And so they took him. So that was the only reason that he got in. And at their office, they had a child psychologist at that time, psychiatrist.
Mm.
And so she actually listened to us. So she is the one
Oh,
that really
wow.
got the ball rolling. Um, but until that point, we had nothing. Like it was just, oh, they're just young and being annoying. They just have bad behavior. I'm like, this is not bad behavior. This is something
Yeah.
else.
Right. Right. And so I mean, you did one of the things that we hear from parents all the time and that we hear from other medical professionals. You've got to advocate. If you know something is wrong with your child, you keep pushing and you keep pushing.
Yeah. And that I find is the hardest thing to do at the beginning. Because at the beginning, you trust everybody else. You
Mhm.
trust that the doctors have the best interest in mind. You trust that the schools have your kids' best interest in mind. But
Right.
what I learned, especially with the schools, was they had their best interest in mind. If it was going
Mhm.
to inconvenience the school or the teacher's class, and not to say all teachers, we've had a handful of good ones, but
Of
he's in grade
course.
11 now and it's only been a handful. If it's going to inconvenience them, they're going to tell you what's going to be better for them, not for your kid. And so at the
Mm.
beginning, I used to be like, oh, okay, okay. Like, I have no idea. And
Right.
then I started going, actually, we're not going to switch him class. Actually, if you're sending him home, you're going to officially suspend him so that there was a paper trail. That was their biggest thing, was
Wow.
if he was having a bad day, if he was having a meltdown, they would tell me, you need to come and pick him up. And I did for pretty much most of grade 3 and a little bit into grade 4 before I realized from talking to other parents in this
Mhm.
situation that they're doing that so they don't have to have the paper trail that shows that they can't handle your kid. Um,
Okay.
so that because every time there's a suspension, that suspension has to go to the school board. And so I was like, oh, okay. So every time they would call me, I would say, well, no, unless you're suspending him officially, I'm not picking him up. And forcing them to do that. And that documentation was not only good for them to be held accountable, but also for when we were looking for other supports for him. They asked, well, what proof do you have that this is happening? Well, I have all of these
Oh,
suspension letters here.
got it. Right. And see, how would you know to do that for most
Exactly.
parents? Right.
Right.
And so you mentioned support groups. I mean, this is a huge component of, well, I mean, just anything that parents are going through these days, because it's just, there's so much.
Yeah.
Props to our parents. They did a great job, but it just seems as parents so much more complicated on so many levels. Um, what kind of support groups were you, are these online support groups or these in-person support groups?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ones where I am. There is some in-person ones that Autism Ontario runs. Um, I only went to one of those meetings, but I found the Facebook group of autism parents was the most helpful one because when you're in the moment of going, "Oh my goodness, what do I do?" I can
Mhm.
shoot a message off and be like, "Anybody else know where I can go for XYZ?" And then it's like, "Okay, it's done. I've got it out of my brain. Somebody will answer me. I'll be able to have a direction."
Right. That makes sense. So for parents that are at the beginning of this journey with their child, they have some kind of breathing disorder, a medical complication or autism or something, and now there's this mental component of it, and they're struggling to find their child health and guide them through this journey. What kind of advice could you give them? Just, here's where to start, maybe here's how to approach this.
Yeah. Um, so the first thing I would say is keep notes. That is one of the most important things you can do, even about things that you don't think are important. I remember going to one of the doctor's appointments. They're like, "Well, how old was he when he held a spoon?" It's like, "I don't know." Like that's not it's not a big
Right.
milestone. So things that you don't think are important, if you can just keep quick notes like that it happened, and obviously notes of when the bigger things happen.
Sure.
And when you're keeping those notes, keep them in, it's called ABC. So what happened, the antecedent, the action that actually happened first, what behavior occurred then, and then what was the consequence or the basically the outcome of it. And that
Okay.
way you can just really just photocopy that and give it to the school or give it to the doctor and say, "Look, this is what's been happening." And the frequency it's been happening, and ideally what's caused it to then have the behavior happen, because that's, at least with autism, one of the big things was, well, what triggered it? And for the longest time, I'm like, I don't know. Until I started taking notes and going, there's a pattern here.
Right. Right. So as you started this process and you've worked with your son over the years, and he's in 11th grade now, um, how has his journey changed?
Um, I think that he is a lot more self-aware. So he had his first panic attack when he was in kindergarten.
Mm,
And I didn't know anything about panic attacks. So we took him to the hospital thinking my 5-year-old's having a heart attack.
right.
Um, and so we found out that it was due to anxiety and it was the panic attack. So the first step was really putting words to what was happening. So when something like that would occur, it was, "No, you're not dying. You're anxious right now. You're having anxiety right now." So putting words to whatever is happening,
Okay.
and trying to name those emotions, because kids, especially the younger ones, happy, sad, angry, those are what they
That's
know.
kind of it. Right. Yeah.
But there is so much more to it. Like, just pick happy. Happy has a scale of, I'm content, I am joyful, I'm happy, I'm ecstatic, I'm over the moon, right? So
Hmm.
each base emotion has many within it. So you can, start to put names to those emotions with them, help them to do that. Is a really helpful one for the kid to then start to be like, I'm having, if they say I'm not feeling good or I'm having a bad day, because especially if kids are struggling going to school, sometimes they'll fake being sick
Sure.
and, "Oh, I don't feel good." Well, why don't you feel good? And is it because
Right.
you're sad don't feel good? Is it because your tummy doesn't feel good? Is it because you're feeling um really sad about something that happened at school? Or are you feeling guilty? Are you feeling ashamed? That's a really big emotion, shame.
Mm. That's true, right? Because there is this stigma to it. There definitely is for adults, and having children in the Gen Z generation, I give them props. They talk about things a lot more than we do, and they get it out there, but there is still this stigma, especially in school.
Yeah. And I do find too, they talk about it more, but I don't know if they actually know what they're saying
I would
or
agree with that.
know the consequences of what they're saying.
Yeah. And I would agree with that totally. Absolutely. Right. So, so you're talking him through it. He guides. He, does he? It's not really. You get to a point that you self-regulate. He's just more aware now, and he has coping mechanisms. Would
Yeah.
that
And
be more accurate?
yeah, but by having coping mechanism, you do learn to self-regulate.
Okay.
So like schoolwork, because this just happened earlier today. I was trying to work through his English work with him, and he was getting very, very frustrated with me. He's like, I don't remember that happened at the beginning of the book, and it's the end of the book. And I said, okay, well, let's then talk this through. And I said, okay, so we'll finish just this one question, and then we'll take a break. And that was like, oh, okay. Right. And it's just like, and then he can kind of calm down. So that was, an example of me helping him to regulate. But by knowing those strategies, he has started to self-regulate. So if he's doing an assignment that he's capable of doing by himself, like English is a little trickier. I help him more with that. But if he's doing, he was doing a multiple choice test the other day. So here's your computer. Bye. Like, you don't need me.
Right.
But he was getting frustrated at it. And instead of yelling at me, instead of doing anything else, he goes, I'm taking a break now.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
So there does come a time when self-regulation comes. They're still probably going to need help at times, but much better than it was before. There was no throwing things, no yelling. It's just, I'm taking a break now.
Right. Definitely light at the end of the tunnel. So one of the things that you have done, and we do see this with a lot of moms, it's you're empowered now. You have been through this experience, and you've written several books, two of which we'll put links in the show notes. So A Mother's Truth and Embracing Me. So let's just start with, really, why did you write them?
Well, because I love to write. Because the worst feeling is feeling by yourself. So if I've already been through it and I'm okay with sharing my story, then I should share it. And so A Mother's Truth, that's the one that's actually about raising Lev from being pregnant up until grade 6. We're living through part 2. And it was really cathartic for me too, to put down on paper what we went through. And I've gotten the feedback of, oh my goodness, I see my kid in this book. I thought I was crazy, but I'm not, to other people experience. So that was a really big reason for doing that one. Because the worst part was when it's like, okay, yes, he's got autism, which was like, okay, good. I'm not crazy. I know something was different. But then it was like, okay, now what? Where do I go? So this book is to help those parents go, okay, I have a guide-ish. Like, it's not a step-by-step guide, but it's, this is somebody else's journey, and I can, kind of piece together something for me. And there's worksheets at the end of that book too, of things I've learned, like the ABCs that I was talking about. There's a chart in there, so you can remember it and use it.
Right.
So that's, that was that one. And Embracing Me, that's more on the mental health side. So that's my story of my journey of depression for the past 20 years and what I've learned. And the whole reason I called it Embracing Me is because it's embracing all of who you are. And that is so hard for kids. I mean, it's hard for adults, but it's so hard for kids. So this book kind of goes through why I thought I couldn't, to, oh, it's okay to, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to go to therapy. And again, there's worksheets at the back of that book too. I'm big on worksheets because if I'm trying to tell somebody, here's what you should maybe try, I want them to be able to do it in an accessible way. Yeah.
And I absolutely love that. That's brilliant. So, when we're talking mental wellness, especially again with children, why are we missing the boat as parents? How is this as a society that we're just
That is
missing
a
it?
really loaded question.
It is, I know.
Yeah. And I will answer gladly. There's a lot of different parts to it though. So the first one is, well, we didn't have that when we were growing up. So as parents, how do we know to give it?
True.
Right. So it's something that we had to learn in order to then help our kids, because
Right.
my mom's generation, the generations before her, you didn't talk about it. Right.
Right.
What happened at home stayed at home, and you didn't talk about it. So
And you
that
squish it down and you go about your day and you pull up your big
exactly,
girl pants and do your stuff.
exactly. My mom always used to
Yeah.
say, fake it till you make it.
There you go. Yeah.
Right. So that's the first, I think the biggest step is you have to recognize that you don't have the skills as a parent. And I'll admit I had
Yeah.
went through my own depression, but I didn't have the skills as a parent to then help my kid until
Mhm.
I learned them. So it's not to, I'm not shaming anybody. I was there,
You don't know
right?
what you
I'm
don't
still
know.
learning. Exactly.
Yep.
It's a complete learning process, but you have to be like, hey, I need to learn it. And then after that, I mean, kids are not just needing an environment with their parents, but school bombards them, society, media bombards them with all of these different messages. And it's like, which one do I go to? Which
Mhm.
one is describing what I'm feeling and that kind of thing? And like some kids to their friends, they want to sound either really tough or they want sympathy or whatever, right? Like there's different things
Mhm.
going on in their heads. So
Sure.
it's a lot. And I don't think necessarily we've missed the boat. I think that we are now boarding that boat because it wasn't there before.
That's a really good explanation. Yeah. 100% agree with that. And I think also too, especially a child that you're different.
Yeah.
You're different, whether it's autism, whether it's an airway disorder, whether it's ADHD, sleep apnea. You've got to go to a sleepover with 7 other little girls
Right.
and you snore like a freight train. You're different.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. And a kid like that, do I want to accept going to that sleepover? Like I really want to go, but now are they going to pick on me after I go? There's going to be anxiety around that.
of course there is. Sure. So what are some tips that either, and I guess this would be a kind of twofold, right? Because as parents of children that are different, we have our own anxiety and our own mental wellness check-ins that we need to have.
Yeah.
But what are some of your favorite tips for, parents as well as kids that you've learned over the years?
Okay, well, I'll start with parents just because
Okay.
I want to.
Yep. Why not?
Why not? So find something that you enjoy doing, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of your kid, right?
True.
That's why on the airplane they tell you to put on your airbag thing first and then help somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So find something you enjoy doing. Exercise is always a really good one. I'm not saying you got to go run or you got to go do weights. I've been enjoying aquafit lately. It's a lot of fun. I used to
Nice.
do kickboxing, which is so much fun. Horseback riding, right? So there's other stuff you can do that isn't hitting the gym.
Okay.
Journaling is another really helpful one. And you might be, I mean, I hated journaling at that when I was going through everything, because I had to journal all my kids' issues happening and,
Mm-hmm.
but if you feel that you can journal for yourself as well, have at her. And then my other favorite one, other than actually going to therapy, pets. Pets
Pets.
are great. A dog forces you to go outside for a walk.
Mm.
Cats are just cuddly and sweet, as long as they don't want to murder you.
True. True.
Keep their food bowl full.
Right.
But if you're allergic to those, I mean, my sister's got rats. My niece has got a bird because she's allergic to fur. So, but just having that companion that doesn't judge, doesn't talk back, that's just
Mm-hmm.
there. It's good. My father-in-law always had fish. He loved taking care of his fish. So I would say
It's
that as
relaxing.
well. right? That, you know,
Right.
just swim.
And that is one thing
swim.
about dogs. It doesn't matter what kind of day you've had. It doesn't matter what you look like.
Right? They're gonna love you.
You're the greatest thing ever. And how
Exactly.
does that not lift you up? I mean, really?
Exactly. And so pets are awesome, but you know, I always say therapy is always a good one too.
Well, sure. Right, right.
And for kids, I mean, it's basically the same things. Finding something that they love to do.
Right.
And I mean, kids, they might have something at school, like an after school sport, or it might be something that you have to find elsewhere. Having friends, even just one friend that they can talk to that they feel safe with. And whether that's in person or online friends. My kid struggled quite a lot to find in-person good relationships. And so his best friends are actually all in the States. There was like one in
Mhm.
Texas, a couple in Florida, and he's been friends with them for years now. Um,
Wow.
obviously, make sure internet safety rules and all of
Sure.
that stuff.
Of course,
Yeah.
right.
All his friends know me. They're all, I'll walk in the room. Oh, my mom's here. And they're all like, oh, hi, hi. So it's like they're at my house all the time.
Right, right. Just without consuming all the food in your
Exactly. It's
pantry.
great.
It is. That is a bonus.
Right. So having a friend to talk to is a really good one. And again, pets is great. Um, and we've said it already before, making home a safe place to say, I'm having a bad day. Here's why. Here's what I'm feeling. Helping them decipher that feeling. And if you don't have the skills yourself yet to do that, reach out to a counselor, a therapist, right? They're available.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
And I don't know, did you ever run into issues trying to find, because it sounds like he is more comfortable online, and we do hear that a lot with kids that they're more near their anxieties. They're going to do better online. Were you able to find therapy online? Was that an issue because of
It
his
wasn't
age?
it was an issue at the beginning. Yeah, because of his age but he was okay with going to the therapist, like to leave the house to go to the therapist because he knew that it was safe there.
Okay.
So it was a big difference going to the therapist office as opposed to going to the school, or to a very really busy store. So I think, yeah, that made a big difference. He knew when he got there, it wasn't going to be busy, it wasn't going to be loud. He just sees this one person, but we were lucky. COVID is really what brought online therapy to the
To
forefront.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, COVID and Michael Phelps. I give them both credit for that, for
Right.
sure.
It wasn't all bad. There was some good.
There was some good that came out of it.
Yeah,
Everybody met their neighbors because it's all you could talk to, the people next door.
it's true.
So at the end of every episode, I just like to hand the floor back over 100% to the guests. Anything that you want to, leave our listeners with, anything you want to tell parents, anything we may have forgotten, because you were the expert in this particular topic. So
I think we've kind of covered all of the basics. I mean, there's a lot of layers, but I tried to keep it at our basics, which is the first step. But reaching out really is the most important step. No matter what your kid is going through, reaching out to somebody in the right organization, whether it's autism, whether it's an airway disorder, whether it's a physical disability, whatever it is, reaching out to somebody and saying, I don't know what I'm doing, help me. Because that's what they're there for, right?
right,
And do a lot of your own research. Just make sure that when you're researching, you go, yeah, this is reliable. But
of
do
course.
lots of your own research. Don't just believe what other people are saying without, looking into it yourself. Um, and just make it a safe space for them to say whatever it is they need to say. Don't get mad when they come to you and say, I feel like hurting myself. Getting mad isn't going to help. Getting scared isn't going to help, but it's okay to be scared and it's okay to tell them you're scared. What I mean by it won't help is don't be so scared that you're scaring them into hiding it.
Mm,
Right, because then we're swinging totally to the wrong direction. So if
right.
they're coming to you saying, I'm having these bad thoughts or I'm being bullied at school, which is making me feel whatever way, don't act so scared that it shuts them up. be like, that's really scary to hear. Let's talk about this more, right? I'm here for you. And that way you keep that door open, because communication is going to be 100% key. On my YouTube show, I always end it with my slogan, which is, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. And that is exactly what we've been talking about.
And that is actually a perfect way to end this segment. I appreciate your honesty and your openness so much, Randi-Lee, and for sharing your story and your son's story. And I will make sure that we put the link to your website and your YouTube show and your books, because this is it's support that parents need to hear about and need access to.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Oh, thank you.